how to know when your relationship is being manipulated or it is being tampered with in a way of the unknown. There's many ways to understand this. And some are like not threatening to overthinking about your spouse, and some are. So be aware of these things, because if it doesn't apply to you, then don't overthink and put everything on your spouse, because it may not be your spouse, but then other things may pertain to it being the spouse or yourself, however it goes. But manipulation in a relationship, it all starts with toxicity. Toxicity is basically intentions and thoughts and wrongful doings that really don't serve a purpose for the reasoning of actually being in a relationship, or having goals in a relationship, or pretty much building a future, and all of the above of what we know a relationship should be. And so two different relationships, relationship being couples, spousal couples, and then you have friendships that relationships always come with. You meet someone, they have friends and so forth, you get introduced to the friends and family and all that, and they're kind of in your life, whether they're a little bit in your life or a lot in your life. It just depends. For me, my experience is kind of interesting, I'm not gonna lie. The way I've always been in my relationship, like very mellow and easygoing, and when it came to friendships and my relationships, like I'm cool with not knowing, meaning I can have that understanding and trust, to where it's like, oh, okay, like me, and if my spouse wants to do something for a friend or something, it's like, okay, like, I'll support it. So other people's problems or other people's way of doing may be a little different, but that's always going to come along in a relationship, so these things, with my experience, I've learned that can be effective when you're starting to understand awakening yourself, or self-improvement, or building something new in your life. Because when you start building something new in your life, you have to be at a conscious point to start to want something and all that stuff. So when you're going through steps and you're clearing out your mind, remember that the clarity is going to allow you to be able to be more in tune with yourself and not others, which is kind of like versatile, because you can easily be in tune with others and not know it. But anyways, okay, so you have those type of relationships, and then you have your own relationship. So knowing when it's being manipulated and knowing when it's not being manipulated, the behavior system would definitely change. And what I have learned is that being able to use my own experience may help somebody else that is lacking the experience but needing to know. So in my situation, it was like I became real clear, and I started understanding a lot of things, and I started like, comprehending these messages and all this stuff, and it was like it was a little crazy at first. But what I've learned is that the parties of the situation, like knowing that when you have a sense of clarity, and there could be areas in your life that, things happen, or a friend comes around, or your spouse is worried about, one of her friends or whatever, and more of the focal attention is on the other person. At that point, I would then start picking up a different type of knowing and a different type of like feeling, right? And so, with that being said, I would also know the behavioral change in my spouse. That would kind of be a little off on responding. So it was almost like the conversation would be different talking to the person. And it's not the person's fault, because like at that time, a normal conversation, it'd be like, what the heck, like we talk all the time. How come it's like a duh, huh? Or I don't, whatever it is. And it will upset you, and it will make you like really think like, what like, who are you, and it did. But after the experience, it allowed me to understand some things to where it's like I understand the whole empathic and having sympathy type thing, because you're at that point, like, you're picking up emotions from the other person. It's like a whole nother sense of caring for the person. We have many different ways to care for another person, and the typical way that we know of is like, if they need something, support them, give them, whether it's food, money, a tissue, or some time to talk, or any of those things. Just taking that time out to talk, or trying to comfort the other person through conversation and communication. When it comes to like the whole empathic thing, it's like it's more than that, because you end up becoming a little bit connected with that other person to where you're actually taking some of their emotion off of their shoulders. Like, and it's like the most hidden thing you can ever possibly think of. And it's almost kind of unbelievable, but if others only knew like how much that person did or cared, being able to figure these things out during the proper settings or the proper events, it's like that saying, it hurts so bad to go through this, and it's, they'll use the words pain or whatever it is, or they can't deal with the overcrying, or whatever the situation is. And it's like, it can go either way. It can go both ways, to where it's positive or negative. It just has to be understood properly, to where you can properly understand yourself, to be able to figure out what's going on, because it gets really confusing. And so when that happens, it's like all of a sudden your spouse could be crying for nothing, and they'll have their own thought process of what made them cry, but it might be confusing for them because it may not be the proper, it may not be like in the now. Like it will lead them towards something that will make them cry. Whether it's something they fear of or something that has happened in the past. So once again, that can go either way. It can go towards something that was old that made them cry, and they'll be wondering why they're crying, or it can be something that they fear, and then they end up actually living a moment to where something in the future may be a fear of theirs, and they're actually having the emotion over it. It can go either way. It's kind of odd. But these are what connections do if they're not understood, and the only proper way to understand them is understanding yourself, is being in tune with yourself and knowing, you know, the whole cause, effects, the whys of this and this and that. And so when these things happen, it's like the spouse needs to kind of understand this, or there needs to be some type of like proper communication to where the other one doesn't have to think that they're crazy, I guess, to where they can communicate, because it's almost unexplainable. But they will share emotions in good and bad ways. There's no way around it other than taking care of things that they need to take care of. It could be anything from codependency, reliancy. It can be grudges. It can be jealousy. It can be blaming. It could be hatred. It can be a lot of these things. It can be past problem. It could be any of these things. And so to be able to solve that issue, they would have to literally go through a whole lot of analyzing with each other. Like, because you got to remember, they're sharing emotions. So they're responding, like one's responding and the other one, it's like giving and taking, but they didn't know they were taking, or, you know, back and forth situation. So the way to actually solve the problem and find a solution would be basically dealing with their issues. And the only thing for that is communication and honesty. So to be honest and have communication and communicate properly, whether there needs to be a mediator or a person in the middle, mediating. And so there's certain steps that I'll get into later, because there's always a thought process for each behavior that they need to find a solution towards. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because your marriage or your relationship could be going fine for a little while, and all of a sudden problems occur. And it will seem like it will leave the other person like clueless, like what happened, what'd you do? Like, you know, like looking for every little thing, like completely analyzing yourself, blaming yourself for everything, trying to figure out like all the little things that you did wrong in your relationship. And so you won't realize that, you know, the friendship thing is kind of like a sharing emotion experience type thing. And of course, it'll affect the male in the relationship. And, you know, like common sense, it's a male telling their experience. So, of course, I'm talking about like girlfriends, you know, like spousals, friends, and stuff like that. So, and it does kind of affect in two different ways. One way being having clarity, and the other way not having clarity. Um, the way it affects with the one having clarity, it's like if you're using your clarity for, proper things and helping and stuff like that, your abilities is what they would call them. Like it can affect certain things to where it's like, those abilities are used for self-knowing and also helping other people. And so, yes, it can be effective and so forth. But one thing I've learned is like, even though I went through the experience, the most important thing to know that I've learned is that it's really not their fault at all, like because they didn't know. The other way would be the person not having clarity, so they would kind of have that little duh-duh, effect, like, and they would just be a little fatigued and kind of not knowing a little bit here and there because we're all human. Like this is science. So not being so conscious is like a very slight effect. Being conscious it's a major effect. So anyways, the interpretation of the emotions, like back and forth, it's almost inevitable until the solution is there. It's interesting because so getting out of that fatigue would just have to be a little bit more aware, of the situation or of yourself to be able to understand it so it doesn't bother you so much. It's almost like knowing, like, if you have nothing to be mad about, but all of a sudden you're upset or mad, it's like you want to kind of understand the situation or analyze yourself or whatever and go through steps of wondering why you're mad. If you can't figure out why you're mad, then it would be to, properly talk to your partner and communicate and stuff like that. So, communication is going to be a big issue when it comes to a problem or situation like that, because it can be really effective. So you kind of want to watch out for that. And it's normal for friends to have problems and stuff. You always want to handle those issues because as time goes by, they can either get better or worse. So, and you want them to get better, because it's like, friends not in the best status or having the proper relationship or having issues, it can be kind of effective on your relationship, and them having a good relationship can be a good effect on your relationship, meaning no problems. And so that's, with the friendship type thing. When it comes to understanding this effect, it gets very complicated because there's a difference between the problems and issues versus vindictiveness and vendetta. That's going to be more hidden because the person's going to act like everything's okay. When they act like everything's okay, it's going to be more difficult to discover. That would be through the mannerisms and stuff like that. Knowing, like, everybody understands mannerisms differently, but it's going to be knowing, like, the expressions, facial expressions, and stuff like this. And this has to be, like, in person, like physical communication or over the phone type video chat, whatever it is, Like it has to be analyzed like that. It has to be understood, because you end up getting like the proper responses that are real, and if not, it'd be like an unrealistic response. So if it's being done like, science wise with an ability, it will be somewhat unrealistic, and a little bit more complicated to figure it out. And plus, that would be hidden itself, because it wouldn't really be the proper way. So, but the vindictiveness or the vendettiveness, it's like it goes many ways, because the interaction will be so great, and it gets so fake to a certain point, to where it's building a relationship, but it's also tearing down the health part. Because once again, if you're sharing emotions and y'all are connected like that, or your spouses are, your spouse and their friend are connected like that, it ends up tearing down their health, because they appear to be great. They're both being tricked by their act, and internally it's like there will be some type of issue that will allow them to have some type of issue. And that's where your intuition is kind of used, to where if you're communicating with a friend and all of a sudden you feel uncomfortable or something ain't right, that's where you want to use your communication. You want to ask them. Because if you analyze everything and it seems okay to yourself, it's like, communicate and you might be able to fix that. Like, you might be able to take that relief off of your body. It can be many things. And so that's where your true intuition comes in, is like where something is affecting your body. And so when that happens, that's, the only thing you can do is communicate about it and hope that the other person is honest. If the other person ain't honest, you're not getting any of the response. The only thing from there is it can be that issue where, how typically some people can be a little bit jealous of another friend, meaning you can have a best friend, but then they end up getting a best friend, and it's like, well, I thought that was their best friend, and so forth. And so that third party, or third best friend or whatever, could be kind of contributing to that a little bit as well. And these are all things like, you get to choose, like, if you want to fix them or not. That's where it's like, that's where like the universe kind of steps in, to where it's like natural and it's inevitable to prevent this, because it automatically happens naturally, to where if you want to fix it, or you want to analyze it, or you want to make it better, or whatever, you can take the initiativeness to do so. And from there, it just naturally works, to where, once again, communication resolves this, and you can figure out if it's your decision to walk away or stay in the relationship, and so forth. It basically will give you that natural choice, being able to make your own proper decision. And those are things like you got to figure out yourself. Like, does it suit you? Is there a purpose for this? It just depends, on the relationship and what you're doing in your life. Like why is there a purpose for this person to be in my life? Okay, so there's got to be a reason there if you're trying to figure out something in your relationship, especially if you're listening to this. So if all else fails and you led to listening to something like this, then there must be a very important reason why you're wanting your spouse or your friend still in your life as a relationship. And so there's something there you just gotta figure out, or analyze it or understand it properly. And the easiest way for me to explain is communication. All this is very effective. It ends up spreading because it ends up starting with three. And the reason why it starts with three is because what we understand in life is a relationship starts with two people. And when that relationship with two people has any type of commitment, any type of planning, any type of wanting of a future or whatever, it's a relationship. That's like that's what we know. And so what we know is what we know. Like there's only male and female, so it's logical thinking. But from there it goes on. Like in a relationship, we have the choice to have friends or not have friends in a relationship. And then, of course, there's always, holidays and gatherings and stuff where we visit family and all that stuff. So it's very important to understand these things, because when we interact outside of our relationship, which would be actually outside of our homes, it's like we're going into public, so we're interacting, right? And so if you're picking up all these emotions or all these other thoughts or all whatever it is, being in tune with another person, the proper thing to do is understand your relationship. That'll tell you, like, it'll give you kind of like a warning sign, like what you need to work on, because a lot of it's going to be trust. That's where trust comes into play. And to be able to trust is to be able to feel comfortable, like to be able to know that you can have a little thought, or you can have a little, whatever, it would be a little thought. And you can just brush it off your shoulder real quick, and it won't be much of a hassle. So you don't want these things to like spread out, because it'll end up causing like a lost moment, basically, because you can move on, but the other person can still have an issue with you. And so minor things will cause or have a cause and effect and all that stuff. And when that happens, it's very difficult to find. But to be honest with you, like, that's once again where naturality comes in, and it's going to lead you right back to that person, not knowingly. Because something's drawn to you, or something's like, I can't say pulling your way, but it's more like the occurrence or the repetitiveness keeps on coming back for a reason. And it's to be solved. It's to be either fixed, reconciled, coming to an understanding. It could be many things, but it has to be done. It has to have a positive to it. It has to have a good part to it, because other than that, it's like the only other thing to do is live a awkward life, I guess, with not knowing. But you want to have to find some type of closure, and if it is a negative closure, then keep it like that. But if that negative closure doesn't work, and it's like still a text here or a message there or whatever, like there's something telling you needed to find, there's something that needed to be understood to where it can be properly let go of or something. Now, that's kind of in a friend-based relationship. When it comes to like a different type of way of coming back to you, it can be a little bit different. Like, let's just say, like, this is a different subject. Let's just say, there's infidelity issues or whatever, and you're trying to let go of things and change yourself or whatever. That coming back to you would have to be understood and analyzed properly, because you don't know what the person is trying to fix in their life and trying to change. So that's a whole nother subject. It's something other than what I'm talking about. And it is also a whole nother different exchange of emotions and stuff like that. So one of the only ways to obtain a relationship is to be honest as much as you can. Unfortunately, what I've been talking about this podcast is because people can't figure out what's wrong when they have, been pretty straightforward and honest. So these complications will come into play, and it will be effective in your life. So, knowing how to understand certain situations is always going to be a thought process, but when you come to terms with everything and how to properly handle them, it's trying to figure out how to approach the conversation. And that's going to be up to the people that need to find a solution. So, that's for that situation. Now, the other situation in a relationship would be, a marriage or a couple that has friends as another couple. And it's like being intuitive and being able to have that clarity. It's like right off the bat, you can sense certain things. And so it would be the spousal's honesty versus dishonesty. It would also have to do with intention and their desire. This is where the good meets bad, I guess you can say. It's almost like a testing in effect, but nobody knows it's being tested. Once again, it's like natural laws in effect. It would be like law of attraction or certain things like that. But the honesty part is very important on this, because you'll be ended up like picking up the sense, which could be an emotion of another person, of them overindulging in your spouse when they should be overindulging in their own spouse. Now, when the girls get together, it's like most women would talk about their men, and that's probably the wrong thing to do from my experience. Because then they're kind of like comparing the men towards what they have better than the other. So, like, when it comes to a friendship like this, it's like, understand what to communicate about and understand what not to communicate about. Because a back and forth situation can occur with the misunderstanding of who's better than, right? And so you want to be able to understand it on a caring level, like why y'all hang out, what's the purpose, what's in common, what's this versus what's that, and so you just want to make sure that it's an honest friendship, because it can completely cause the most damage in a relationship. But when you're able to understand yourself and your own feelings, you're able to understand if it's toxic or not. So once again, you want to make sure that y'all's intentions are caring and the other couple's intentions are caring as well, because the responses that you will end up picking up on won't even be of your own response. It will be of their response, depending on your behavior. If you're kind of shy to yourself and they're kind of, filling it out, testing it out, and you're not all into everything but trying to be involved, you'll end up picking up their intention or emotions or whatever it is. For the people involved, it's like, it's a little bit different, because that would have to be through the mannerism and the conversations that are kind of being spoken, and that are, whatever the situation is for the event, it's just like, just have a precaution, because you never know the other person's intentions. So learn what toxicity is, because I steer clear from toxicity because of the sense of clarity. So, sometimes it's best just to have an open understanding and let things kind of be discovered before jumping to a conclusion. So, relationship advice is very easy to give, because it can also be the most common sense thing ever, which is basically honesty, trusting, having a future planned out. Because if you don't have a future planned out, or you don't really see a future with the other person, it's like you're living in the moment, right? The reason for all these things is so you know how to properly make your decisions, to have the right intention. Having a negative intention with the state of mind of consciousness, it's going to completely veer off path of anything, cause confusion. It's going to make this whole emotional back and forth situation with everything I've spoken about 10 times worse. So you always want to make sure that your intention is proper and you feel comfortable in your relationship and you're not over judging, and communication would be the number one thing to be able to handle all this stuff in the proper way to actually have some type of balance. So it's all about understanding. I mean, that's what relationships are about, is communication. So if you're lacking that and you don't have it, you need to figure out why you don't have the communication. Because communication is very important. So everything that would be common sense, that would be the last thought that somebody would wonder why relationships aren't working out, whether it's a friend or a marriage or any of those things. It's just very easy to say. Be honest, be faithful, be loyal, and think logical. Like, because all those equal up to honesty. And all those will change in intention in many different ways, whether it's a bad intention or a good intention. Because the way it can change a good intention is like you still want to be there, like you still want to talk to the person, you still want to be there, you still want to have them in your life, but at the same time, like you won't fully devote your attention to the other person. And that can cause problems as well. So look out for those things, because they're all important when trying to maintain a relationship in your life. And the next episodes followed by this episode, I'll try to touch base on each individual behavior to try to find a solution to help others out with letting go or figuring out some type of resolvement for the issues that others have, including yourself.